The food did nothing wrong. Sit down.
Send them home. Nathan Quaid said it to the floor. There was nobody in that room he could say it to. It was the 27th of August, 1887, a Saturday, 10:30 in the morning, in the town hall at Wardlow, Idaho Territory, up a valley that had been cutting timber for 11 years. The bride had taken the morning train east. That is all Wardlow ever knew about it. 4 tables the length of the room, boards on trestles, 120 places, plates and chairs out of every house in town, no 2 of them a pair. At the head, where the 2 of them were to have sat, 1 white plate with a blue line around the rim, the only thing on that table anybody had chosen. In the kitchen there was 3 days of cooking, none of it carried out yet. The woman in the kitchen doorway was Leona Salter, 28, hired out of the hotel for $9. Mr. Quaid, he did not turn around. Send them home, Miss Salter. Tell them there's... He did not find the end of it. That's yours to tell or not tell. I have no part in it. Then let it go to waste. You'll be paid the same. She came out 2 steps and looked down the boards, and then at the doorway, where 100 people in their good clothes stood not knowing whether to come in. The food did nothing wrong, Leona Salter said. Sit down. Nobody moved. 100 people asked to a wedding and handed something else will stand very still, because the first one to sit down has said something about it. She went up to the head place and took the white plate off it, and the cup, and set the chair back against the wall. She did it the way anybody clears a table, and it was done before most of that room understood what she had cleared. Then she came back to the near end. There's 100 people out there and 3 days of food, she said. Sit down and I'll bring it. Emery Voss was 71 and had come 4 miles in a wagon and was not going home hungry over anybody's feelings. He sat down. Then the Ottleys, because Mrs. Ottley had known Nathan Quaid since he was a boy and could think of nothing useful to do except take a chair. Then the near end, and the far end, and the doorway, and the steps. Reverend Chalfant got as far as the head of the table and stopped, because he had a wedding in his mouth and no wedding in front of him. What am I to say over it? The one you'd say over a supper. He said the shortest grace of his working life and sat down with the rest. Nathan Quaid stayed at the back wall with his hat in his hand. Here is what came out of that kitchen. 2 beef roasts and a ham, fried chicken in 4 dish pans, new potatoes, and string beans done with bacon, and stewed tomatoes, and corn cut off the cob that morning. Pickles out of the hotel cellar. Bread baked Thursday and Friday, and again at 4 that morning. 7 pies, apple and dried peach, and a spice cake in the corner, under a cloth that nobody mentioned. She did not carry it herself. She stood at the kitchen end and told people where to put things, and they put them there. 2 women came in off the near end, with their sleeves already up. She gave them the beans and the potatoes, and never said it was good of them, which was the correct thing, and they knew it. By noon, that room had a stir to it that had not been there at 10:30. It was not happiness. It was 100 people at boards with food in front of them. And that has its own way of carrying on, whether anybody has decided to be glad or not. Nathan Quaid did not sit. He stood along the back wall where the coats were, and shook hands with men who came over to say a thing and found there was nothing to say. Watch what 100 people do when nobody has told them what they are allowed to do. They will not decide it out loud. There is no vote in it. What happens is that somebody with no stake in the shame of it does the next plain thing, sits down, takes a plate, passes the beans to the left, and the plain thing goes down a table faster than any speech ever made in that hall. I would not tell you they forgot what the day was. Nobody forgot. Every soul at those boards knew there was a man against the back wall who had been left, and knew the head of the table was empty, and could have told you the hour of the train. What they did instead was eat. Out of the two things a town can do with a man's worst morning, go home so he can have it in private, or stay and put an ordinary day on top of it. They were handed the second one, and they took it. That was not their idea. They had been told to sit down. By 2 o'clock, somebody at the far end laughed and did not apologize for it. By 3, the men had their coats off, and the talk had gone where talk goes in a timber valley in August. The price of shingle bolts, the dry summer whose team had gone lame on the grade. And it went there the way it does at any supper, which is to say gratefully. At 4, she sent the pies down. At 5, a man asked, careful about it, whether there was a cake, and she brought it out already cut on plates. No knife, no ceremony, nothing to stand up over. And that was the end of the cake, as a thing anybody had to be brave about. Emery Vass pushed his plate an inch away from him, which was his manner of paying a compliment, and set it out into the room at nobody. Who set this table? 2 men near him said the Quades had, which was true about the paying. Somebody else said the church women. Somebody else did not answer at all, having his mouth full. Leona Salter was in the kitchen with her back to the doorway and both arms in a dishpan, and did not hear it. It was not a question yet. It was an old man being pleased. But it had been asked out loud in that hall, and that is where it started. At 8 o'clock, Nathan Quaid came the length of the hall and stood in the kitchen doorway, which he had not done all day. The tables behind him were down to elbows and coffee. In the kitchen, the pans were stacked to the shelf, and the stove was still going, and the heat came at him like a hand on the chest. Miss Salter, Mr. Quaid, I'll want to settle with you. Tomorrow will do. He stood there. He had come to say something else, and it was not going to come out of him, and both of them could see it. She reached behind her, took a plate off the shelf, put beef on it, and 2 potatoes, and a piece of bread, and set it on the end of the work table. Sit, she said. You've had nothing since yesterday. I know it, because I'd have had to cook it. He sat down on an upturned box at the end of that table and ate everything on the plate. At 10:30 that morning, Nathan Quaid could not have told you the name of the woman cooking his wedding. He could have told you by 8 that night, and he was 33 years old, and it had never once occurred to him that this was worth being ashamed of. I have put a fair amount of time into what a harvest supper actually was in that country, because the word has gone soft on us, and it was not a soft thing. A valley out there had one room big enough to hold itself, and everything happened in it. The threshing dinners, the Christmas doings, the funerals when the weather was bad, the dances that ended when the lamps ran dry. The tables were boards on trestles, because there was no such thing as a table that long. The chairs came in from the houses and went home in the dark, and half of them went to the wrong house and were sorted out over the month after, which was a kind of visiting. And the food was enormous, not fine, enormous. 150 people fed twice over, all of it laid out at once, because the point of the thing was the sight of it. I will not make that country better than it was. Plenty of those suppers had a fight out behind the hall before they were over, and somebody in a corner being talked about. But a hall like that had a rule under it, older than the town, which is that food set out is meant to be eaten by whoever is standing in front of it. Wardlow did not invent that. It only found out that morning what the rule was for. Wardlow and its people are mine. The rule is not. They went home at 11 and took their chairs with them. By midnight, the hall was boards and trestles and one lamp, and there was one chair left in the middle of that floor that nobody had come back for. A plain kitchen chair with a scorch on the left arm, where somebody's stove had marked it years before. She carried it into the kitchen and sat down on it at 12:10, and ate off the white plate with the blue line around the rim. And she had not sat down since Thursday. In the morning, Nathan Quaid came to the hotel and put money on the table in the front room. That's 18. The work was 9. You did more than the work. The work was $9, Mr. Quaid, and you'll take 9 of that back off this table. If I let you make it 18, then what I did yesterday was a favor. And it was not a favor. It was Saturday. He took $9 back off the table. He did it slowly enough that she could see it cost him something. On his way out, he stopped in the hall for the chair with the scorch on the arm and put it in the mill office, and did not say why, and was not asked. Nobody in this story is going to tell you why the bride got on that train, and I am not going to invent it for them. I know how that sits. A thing that size wants a reason, and if none is handed over, people will make one, and the one they make will be unkind, because unkind is the cheapest to make. Here is everything there is. She came out in June. She was in Wardlow 10 weeks. She was at the hall that Friday and looked at the tables and said they were fine. And the next morning she was on the eastbound with her own 2 bags and her own fare paid, which the ticket agent said once and then had the sense never to say again. Whatever it was hers, and she took it with her. I will say the one thing I'm sure of. A woman who buys her own ticket at that hour, in that town, with 120 places, laid 400 yards up the street, has not done it lightly, and has not done it out of nothing. She does not come back into this. Neither does the blame. Wardlow talked about it until the middle of September, and then settled on 2 stories, the way towns do, and kept both. The first one was Nathan Quaid. He was a good man, and everybody said so. And everybody said so in the tone that goes with the word after. And the word after was always some form of poor. He came down for what the mill needed, and went back up. And if he was 3 weeks between, nobody remarked on it, except to say he was keeping busy, which was their way of saying they had seen him at the depot in August and could not stop seeing it. The second story was the woman who had run that supper. She got her due, and her due had a shape to it. She was praised the way weather is praised. There was not a soul in that valley who would have said a hard word about Leona Salter, and not one who thought of her when they were thinking about who belonged there. She cooked breakfast for 11 boarders at the hotel through September and October, 6 days a week, and was paid, and was thanked, and was not once asked to sit down at a table she had laid. That is the whole difficulty with being the person who does it. It is very hard to be angry at a town that likes you. On the 14th of October, Mrs. Otley came into her own hotel kitchen at 6 in the morning and stood by the flour barrel until she had it in an order she could say. Wendell's coming back at the new year. Then he'll want the kitchen. He'll want the kitchen. The 1st of January then. That gives you the holiday trade and me time to look. Mrs. Otley had been braced for something and had nowhere to put it. She said the kitchen had never been run better, which was true and no use. And Leona Salter went on with the biscuits. Here is what she had at 28. 2 knives she had brought from Indiana and kept better than most men keep a gun. A copper kettle. A tin box with her mother's things in it. 3 aprons and 1 good dress. That was the freight of her, and it went in 1 wagon trip. Her mother had cooked for a railroad boarding house at Vincennes and turned it over to her at 19. Hands gone, and died in the spring of 1884. Leona Salter came west the next year with a threshing outfit and had been in 9 kitchens since, feeding 6 men or 30, and had eaten at the end of every one of them, standing. Not one of the 9 had been hers. Up at the mill, it was the best autumn they ever had, and Nathan Quaid worked it like a man being chased. He was in the yard before the whistle and after it. He took the Tuesday freight down himself instead of sending Dunnigan. Wardlow saw him on mill errands and never passed the afternoon. Here is what was actually the matter with him, and he would not have said it to Dunnigan or anybody. It was not that she went. He had turned that over all summer, and there was a piece of it he understood better than the town did, and he kept it to himself out of a decency nobody ever gave him credit for. It was that 100 people had watched him stand against a wall with his mouth shut, unable to do the one thing a man is supposed to do in his own hall, which is tell people what the day is. Somebody else had done it, in 2 sentences, and gone back to her pans. The chair, with the Scorch on the arm, was in the mill office by the stove. Dunnigan sat in it twice with nothing said, and stopped sitting in it, and did not know why. The fall cut ran to the last week of November, and the camp up the grade fed 26 men twice a day. In the middle of October, the camp cook quit. Leona Salter took it to the 1st of December at $35 a month and her board, which is how a woman with a kitchen going out from under her keeps from being frightened. Nathan Quaid ate at that camp on Thursday nights at the near end with the men. On the 27th of October, he put his fork down and set it into the table. Who set this table? The cook, Dunnigan said. Same as every night. The men went on eating. Nathan Quaid got up and went into the cookhouse kitchen, where the heat came at him the way it had in August. She was scraping a pan. I have eaten at that table 11 weeks, he said. I never once asked. That's the ordinary way of it. It oughtn't to be. It's the way it is, Mr. Quaid. And it was before either of us, and I've not lost sleep over it. She turned the pan over and set it on the rack. You've asked now, she said. That's all asking gets you. Go on and eat before it's cold. He went back out and ate it cold. The first time that question was asked, a man asked it of a room. The second time, a man asked it and then got up to find out. There is a mistake people make about women like Leona Salter, and it is a generous mistake, which is what makes it so hard to argue with. The mistake is to look at her and think, that woman needs taking care of. They are not being cruel. They are being kind in the only shape they have. They see a woman on somebody else's ground with everything she owns in one wagon load, and the word that comes to them is, provide, and they are wrong. She did not need taking care of. She was better at it than anybody in that valley, and knew it, and was not humble about it. And being handed care would have been like being handed her own kettle back. What she had never once had was a place. Not shelter. She had always had shelter. A place. The thing at the end of a table that has your plate on it, whether you have come in yet or not. Nobody offers a woman that out of pity, because pity does not think of it. Pity thinks of a roof. That is the difference the rest of this turns on. And the one man in Wardlow who was ever going to find it out had to be made stupid with shame first. The town met in the hall on the 5th of November, a Saturday, to settle the winter use of it, the dances, the stove wood, who had it and what for. About 60 people were there. Leona Salter was in the third line of chairs, because the camp had come down early. The business went along. Then Nathan Quaid stood up, which he had not done in that hall in 2 years. The freight room across from the mill is empty and dry, and there's a chimney in it. I'll let it to Miss Salter for an eating house at whatever she cares to name, and I'll put a range in before the snow. That's mill money and not a gift. I'll have it back off my own men boarding there instead of walking to the hotel. That was the business, and it was good business, and half the room was already nodding at it. Then he turned around and said the rest of it to her, in front of all of them, in the plainest voice he had. You fed 100 people the day I could not lift my head. Let me set a place for you, for the rest of mine. Nobody said anything for a space you could have carried a dish across. There's no answer owed on that tonight, he said, nor any night. If it's no, the range goes in Thursday just the same. Then he sat down. Leona Salter did not answer him that evening. She went back up the grade on Monday. I have chased down what a hired cook's day actually came to out there, and it is not a small thing to look at. She was up at 4. 2 hot meals for 20 or 30 men, and a cold one carried out to the cut at noon. Bread every day, because there was no other kind. Water carried, and wood, and the stove going in August in a room with a low ceiling. The money was real money. I would not have you thinking they were martyrs about it. A good camp cook could ask more than a man swinging an axe, and did because a camp with bad food loses its crew in a week, and everybody in that business knew it. So it was not that the work was hidden. Nothing was less hidden. 26 men put their boots under that table twice a day. It is that the day comes down to us as the men's day. The cut, the weather, the team. The man who put his leg under a log and the man who got him out. The cook is the one person in the whole day that nobody thinks to name. I have found her now and then at the end of a recollection. A woman's name, no other word about her. And then it goes back to the timber. She came into the mill office on the 28th of November and got straight to it. 3 things, and if you'll not have the first one, there's no sense in the other 2. Say the first one. $6 a month from the first month, the same as I paid Mrs. Otley, not a cent under. and you'll take it in front of somebody the first Saturday, so there's a witness to it. That range cost me 40. Then you've made a poor bargain, and you'll make it up on your own men. $6. 6 then, second. No soul in Wardlow is ever to say you set me up. If you're asked, you say she rents it. Those are the words, and you'll use them, because I've been in a town that said the other thing about a woman, and I'll not be in another one. Third. She took her time on the third one. You'll not ask me anything at all until that place has run a full year on its own money. Not the spring. The year. That's March of '89. It is. That's a long while to be told to hush. You'll manage. You've managed worse this year. The chair with the scorch on the arm was by the stove where it had been since August. She looked at it on her way out and said nothing about it. And neither did he. The eating house opened on the 11th of March, 1888, with 8 tables and a range better than anything in the county. The millmen came because it was 40 steps closer than the hotel and stayed because of the pie. By June, she had a girl helping at the sink and had already raised the girl's wage without being asked. She paid the $6 on the first Saturday of every month in the mill office, and the first time Dunnigan was standing right there, which was nobody's accident. And she still ate standing at the end of her own work table. Last, after the room had emptied, which is a habit 10 years deep and does not come out for a lease. In August, Emery Vass put it to the town that Wardlow ought to have a harvest supper in the hall every September, and everybody agreed so fast that nobody had to say out loud what day it was near. Mrs. Otley came over about it. You'll not cook it. Somebody has to. Somebody will. It isn't going to be you, and I'll tell you why, and then I'm going home. 14 houses have said they're bringing a dish, and every one of them said it in the same breath as your name. If you're back of that stove, not one of those women will believe she was any use. On the 8th of September 1888, a Saturday, the hall at Wardlow put up 4 tables the length of the room, boards on trestles, and the chairs came in from every house as always. 14 households cooked it. It was not as good. The gravy at the near end was wrong, and everybody knew whose it was. And Leona Salter, who could have fixed it in 4 turns of a spoon, let it be wrong. At the head, there was one white plate with a blue line around the rim, and behind it a plain kitchen chair with a scorch on the left arm, brought down from the mill office that morning. They put her in it at noon. She sat down slowly, the way a person does who is watching for the joke in a thing. Mrs. Otley carried her plate to her, the length of the room, set it in front of her, and went back for the coffee. Emery Vass was 72, and stood up with his cup at 1:30. Who set this table? And the hall answered him. Not together and not tidily. A name from the far end, 2 more from the middle. Somebody's aunt saying she had done the pickles and nothing else, thank you. It went on a while and got loud. That's better, Vass said. I asked that same question in this room last year, and not one of you could tell me. Nathan Quaid was at the back wall by the coats, hat in his hand, on the same yard of floor as in August of '87. He stayed there the whole afternoon on purpose, so the room had nowhere to look but at the head of the table. Come back to that hall one more time. The boards are the same boards. Everything else about the 27th of August had been put away. The chairs went home. The plates went home. The man who was left got up the next morning and ran a mill. The one thing nobody could give back was the sitting down. He asked her in April of 1889, out on the mill landing, with the year run out and the rent paid to the day. She made him say it twice, not out of hardness. She had spent her grown life being useful to people at the exact moment they were too busy to look at her, and wanted to hear it said once when there was nothing on the stove. They were married in the hall in June, and she did not cook a thing, and said afterward that was the strangest part of the business. She asked for $9 and the use of a stove. What she got instead was a room with her name on the rent, a girl at the sink whose wage goes up twice a year, a man who will not sit down until she has, and a table in that valley that does not start until she is at the head of it. The chair with the Scorch on the arm is in the mill office from October to August. It comes down to the hall on a handcart every September, and there is not a soul in Wardlow who has to be told which end of the table it goes at. Good night.